When you're building a skyscraper in the Big Apple, you need to follow 3 key rules to win over New Yorkers. First of all, make sure you fit in and add value. In other words, don't mess up the skyline. Secondly, all style and no substance is a recipe for a backlash. So building ultra-luxury homes for the mega-rich in a city that's facing a housing crisis. And third, do not under any circumstances do what the team behind New York's latest skyscraper is doing. Can anyone legitimately argue that New York's skyline isn't the most iconic in the world? The Big Apple has the most recognizable cluster of buildings on the planet. From Billionaire's Row to the rectangular Central Park and the tip of Lower Manhattan, this place really is one of a kind. In years gone by, you could appear from virtually any avenue, subway, or bus and use the Empire State, but it might be losing its soul, and 262 Fifth Avenue kind of epitomizes how. Now, on the face of it, the city's biggest gripe with this tower is to do with a building we really hope you're familiar with if you're subscribed to this channel, the Empire State. One of the most famous skyscrapers ever. But what on earth has 262 Fifth Avenue, a 262-meter pencil-thin tower, got to do with New York's Art Deco darling? Well, even though it's nowhere near being a super tall, it does a fantastic job of getting in the way. You see, Lower Fifth and Madison Square Park used to offer some of the most defining angles of this great tower. But now, with this new structure in the way, you wouldn't even know the Empire State Building was there. And New Yorkers have some thoughts about that. Now, inevitably, the construction of ever more buildings means New York will continue to see its most iconic old skyscrapers become a bit lost in the concrete jungle. Cities like London and Paris have passed regulations to protect the sightlines or views of their key landmarks. But New York hasn't done that. And the chances are, it never will. 262 Fifth Avenue was designed by the Russian architecture firm Meganom, which is taking on its first commission in the US. And while the pencil-thin aesthetic isn't exactly getting a lot of love, the frustrations go quite a bit deeper than just the view. Rising to that 262-meter height, you'd think that 262 Fifth Avenue would offer a lot of new properties for Manhattan. But that's not how things work in this city. There's a huge amount of money around, and the super rich are looking for somewhere to invest their wealth. So if a developer can offer very high-value apartments, they stand to make a lot of money. Cue projects like this that feature enormous whole-floor residences worth an absolute fortune. 262, although still impressively tall, will have just 26 properties across its height, each averaging 3,200 square feet of floor space. And that right there is one of the reasons that buildings like this catch such flack from everyday New Yorkers. Architectural styles and views being obscured is one thing, but the deep-rooted wealth gap is quite another. And for many, developments like this personify the problem. They stand as a response to the demands of the investment market, not the housing crisis. Their architecture is about maximizing a financial return, not creating shelter. It's something the architect and author Matthew Soules talks about in his book Icebergs, Zombies, and the Ultra-Thin.
Architecture is under a tremendous amount of pressure to satisfy the investment kind of absorption role.
The result is what Matthew describes as a mutation of our built environment. Whole-floor apartments with no neighbors to create problems, no backyards to maintain, open-plan living that fetches a higher price, structural cores relocated. In many ways, some of today's developers aren't really building homes. They're building financial assets, safety deposit boxes for the uber-wealthy. Take a closer look at the architecture of 262 Fifth Avenue, and it does appear to be a recipe for much of the same kind of thing. It rises to a considerable height, but from a very small site footprint, as its developers work to optimize their return. The result is a building with a width-to-height ratio of 1:19, meaning it's 19 times taller than it is wide. For context, The incredibly tall Empire State Building that 262 is blocking views to has a width-to-height ratio of 1:3, and 432 Park Avenue, famed for its crazy, slender design, has a ratio of 1:15. A key challenge with all skyscrapers is the impact of lateral wind loads, something that gets even more pronounced with a slender building. If those wind loads are too great, it can cause a building to sway. It limits something called vortex shedding, where different speed air currents can form behind a structure. One of the facades is also fitted with an aluminum and triple glazed curtain wall system. That aluminum box on the side of the tower is another significant mutation. It normally runs through the center of the floor plate and includes services, lifts, and stairs. Here, it's pushed to the side, creating those open-plan apartments. The result is that the apartments kind of sit like shelves attached to the backbone. In fact, Meganum said they wanted to put people on viewing platforms in the air. Translation: high investment potential. Apartments that are worth even more money. It all comes back to what Souls was talking about. Less of a mutation and more of a great design feature. The box at the top of the building is planned as an exclusive viewing platform that developers hope residents will be able to reserve for private events. It's not completed or opened yet, but this tower does appear to have the ingredients that could see it fall victim to a phenomenon Souls describes as zombie urbanism, where properties are owned but not occupied. Too many buildings like that start to become a problem for our cities. They're still there, but their essence, the citizens that made them great in the first place, are not. On the face of it, to the outside world, New York still looks like New York. Its body is still there, but its soul is being steadily hollowed out. Now, that's a real rub in New York, which is facing a pretty severe housing crisis. And the city is reportedly only building about half as many homes as it needs each year. The cost of housing is constantly climbing, and so billionaire towers with apartments that may rarely, if ever, be lived in, can feel very frustrating to your average New Yorker. The housing crisis is a real concern that doesn't look set to be fixed anytime soon. And what's frustrating is that this was kind of predictable. New York has built its reputation on capitalism and expansion. Developers are always looking to increase their margins, and sadly, profit isn't found in buying a plot like this and building a 262-meter-tall tower with 100 apartments in it. There's not a lot of 20-story buildings going to be put up in New York anymore. 262 Fifth Avenue isn't exactly alone in what it represents. It's one of a number of pencil-thin luxury towers in this city. But it just happens to grab headlines because of its impact on the iconic Empire State Building. Blocking sightlines might not be the end of the world. After all, it's development that drives the city forward, and New York doesn't really have regulations protecting the sightlines of certain buildings. It was never going to stop building or stop growing just because certain people or certain visitors wanted to keep the views of buildings that they quite liked. The bigger issue is how some of the world's richest people are now using this city as an asset base, because that eats away, like I said, not at New York's identity, but at its soul. But don't forget that we're inspiring the next generation of builders through our investment into BrickBorrow. You can learn more and get started today over at brickborrow.com. And as always, guys, if you enjoyed this video and you want to get more from the definitive video channel for construction, make sure you're subscribed to Epic World Projects.